Also earlier today, Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network hosted the group's annual breakfast for Martin Luther King Jr. Day in Washington, D.C. Notable speakers included former Vice President Joe Biden, Martin Luther King Jr. III, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund President Sherrilyn Ifill, and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. This is what I call King Day excitement. Can we give a round of applause on this blessed day? And everyone is finding their seats. It is such a pleasure to have everyone here this morning. The ladies look beautiful as ever and the men handsome. Thank you all. We still have a few folks making their way in this morning. Please come on in and find your seat. In this wonderful brisk morning, but no snow. Can I say amen to no snow? Well, my name is Michelle Ebanks, and I am CEO of Essence Communications. Thank you. And I am your co-chair this morning with my sister Tanya Leah Lombard, who, due to unforeseen circumstances, is not here today. She is head of National Public Affairs at AT&T, and you all know Tanya, and you know that she is here in spirit and in staunch support of NAN and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. So welcome everyone to the annual National Action Network Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast. Good morning, everyone. Each year, the National Action Network hosts this celebratory breakfast to reflect upon the life and achievements of civil rights icon Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Through the work of organizations like NAN, the work of Dr. King's legacy continues to live on. 2019 indeed is poised to be a very important year for the Black community. From politics to business, from the arts to wellness, we have to make sure that our voices are heard. Tanya and I look forward to working with Reverend Sharpton, along with all of you and the National Action Network, to make sure that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream becomes a reality. Today's breakfast features a dynamic group of speakers, presenters, and honorees. We are pleased to introduce to you now a very special guest who will be hosting today's program, best-selling author, actor, and our friend, Mr. Hill Harper.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is beautiful to see so many amazing folks out this morning, and it was so cold here that I'm happy that I'll be leaving in about 2 hours. So I'm your host this morning for the National Action Network's annual Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast, and this is a beautiful opportunity for us to reflect on the life and the legacy of Dr. King and the fulfillment of all of his hard work and fulfillment of what we would call or refer to as Dr. King's dream. I'd like to give special thanks to my friend, my brother, Reverend Al Sharpton, and the National Action Network. Please give it up for Rev. And also the D.C. office led by Bureau Chief Ebony Riley. Give it up. So, and let us give a round of applause for my dear friend. Tanya Lombard, she's from New Orleans. The Saints were robbed yesterday, and she's hurting. She's hurting. She's in mourning, so she couldn't be here. She'd already booked her tickets to Atlanta, but we love Tanya, and we miss her. I want to bring up Reverend Yolanda Pierce. She's the Dean of Howard University Divinity School, and to offer a blessing this morning. Rev. Y'all can clap. That's good.
Good morning. It is critical that we begin everything that we do with prayer and thanksgiving, so I ask you to please pray with me. Create in us, O God, new hearts. Restore your right spirit within us. In a world of violence and denial of basic human dignity, may we be lights in the darkness. In a world of abundance which allows your children to go hungry, may we work to banish famine and malnutrition. In a world which places ambition and the quest for wealth above the value of love, may we stand as your witnesses that you, God alone, are the source of all of our strength. In a world where disagreements and long-standing enmities are resolved by war, may we be reconcilers of your peace. It is a world that you have created through your love, so may we teach all to see your face in all the peoples of creation. O God of time and eternity, help us to look to the past with gratitude and to the future with hope. We remember those who have gone before us here this day, our elders, our ancestors, our forebears, who labored not for themselves, but had a vision, a dream of building a future, a world better than the one they had known. May we too labor for things beyond ourselves. May our lives be dedicated to a high purpose. Make us unafraid of hopes and dreams. Release us from cynicism and despair. Teach us to be realistic about our limitations, but to never lose hope and our potential to transcend them. I pray this prayer in the name of the one to whom my grandmother taught me to pray. Jesus, amen. Amen.
Everyone, please take your seats. Please take your seats. I know most of you are doing that intermittent fasting diet, so you're not eating this morning, so you want to talk to folks. Please take your seats so we can continue the program. We will continue while you have your delicious breakfast. Shh. I know you're taking a lot of selfies. You want to post some things to Instagram. But we're going to continue the program. I'll say I'm sitting right here next to Mayor Bloomberg. For those of you who are investors, you know he's one of the greatest financial minds of history. He told me to buy Bitcoin, so that's just a tip for you. Just a little tip. And of course, we have Vice President Biden. There's a wonderful story he tells about seeing young black children being bused out of Scranton and realizing there was injustice in the discriminatory behavior and the different treatment of different folks. You know, I got a call. There's on Instagram right now, there's the 10-year challenge going on. And about 10 years ago, my Harvard Law School classmate called me up and he said, Hill, will you go campaign with my running mate? And I said, absolutely, I go campaign with your running mate. And he said, listen, no matter what people say about Joe Biden, he's going to be a good vice president. And he is outstanding. And so it's my pleasure and honor to bring up and speak first about the founder and president of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton. Now, if there is someone who embodies the spirit of Dr. King, it is Reverend Al. He has been fighting for us for decades. He's tireless. He just told me he gets up at 4:30 in the morning every day to work out. And then he goes back to sleep. It's amazing what he does. Reverend Sharpton continues to be one of the most respected voices in the black community. And he works tirelessly to push challenges of urban America to the forefront of our nation's attention. This morning's breakfast is only one of many things Reverend Sharpton puts together for the community. And we all know that 2019 will be another amazing and busy year for NAN. And with that, will you say with me, as we bring Reverend Al up, say no justice, no peace. Reverend Al Sharpton.
Give a hand to our host, Hill Harper. Come on, you can do better than that. Certainly, we're happy to honor you today as we honor Dr. King, and we're certainly honored that you would share with us. Let me recognize first some of our board members, the CEO of Essence Magazine, who you saw. This is the largest, not only black women's magazine in the world, but they have the largest festival of African Americans in the world, 500,000 people in New Orleans. For some of you that are thinking about running for president, just a hint, you might want to go, just a hint. And we're happy to have Michelle open up for us. Certainly Kristen Dorr-Page, one of our board members sits on our board, Lamel McMorris, and the Reverend Johnny Green is with us, one of our board members, Pastor Mount Nebo. And many from the civil rights community, and I'll be recognizing them throughout the breakfast. But the chairman of the DC Council, Phil Mendelson, Anita Bonds, Councilmember Charles Allen, Councilmember Vincent Gray, as well as some of our labor leaders, certainly one that has given so much for so long, Cleola Brown from Ifill of Randolph. Vanita Gupta from the Leadership Conference, formerly with the Justice Department, and Christian Clark, so many others. And I'm happy that many of you are here. As Hill was joking about the head table, I brought my youngest daughters with me. My oldest daughter just made me grandfather for the first time, so she couldn't come. And I was telling my youngest daughter that I'm going to sit you near Mayor Bloomberg since you want to be a business person. And she said, did he struggle? I said, well, let me put it this way. The last time he wrote a bad check, the bank bounced. I want us to know, though, as we gather today, that we gather at a time that is critical. We are in a very divided and polarized nation. And Dr. King confronted what was wrong, but also wanted reconciliation. Today, as we have this breakfast, there is no official event at the White House to celebrate Martin Luther King Day. The vice president that, in my judgment, misquoted Dr. King yesterday, nor the president has any official thing on their calendar to celebrate a federal holiday that Ronald Reagan signed in. This is an insult to the American people that the President of the United States does not officially recognize or give any ceremony for Dr. King. Dr. King is neither Republican or Democrat. He's an American icon that made America better. And in a day where 800,000 federal workers cannot be paid or on furlough, and subcontractors and contractors impacted, and Dr. King was killed on his way to this city to build a poor people's campaign. He was killed in Memphis fighting for workers, and federal workers are not paid. And the White House has not only shut down those workers, they've shut down the King holiday. Yet, we still have hope, because we have seen despair before. The same Ronald Reagan that said he would never sign a King holiday ended up signing it. And the same people that said they would never sit in the front of the bus with blacks are now home celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday today. So we have hope, and we hope that leadership will come to this country and will show a king-like spirit. We do not apologize in National Action Network for direct action, whether it be around any of the issues that we have fought. We learned them from Dr. King, and we learned them from his team, and we're committed to continue them. I'm very grateful that we started this organization 28 years ago. We are now in 102 cities. Kyra Valley, who's done a great job running our Washington Bureau and worked this breakfast this morning. Mary Pat Hector, our youth director from Atlanta. A whole nother generation of National Action Network leadership is on. I was telling Vice President Biden that I remember I started as a teenager. Now we have teenagers, so I'm adjusting Sherrilyn to being the old guy in the office. I used to be the youngest one in the meeting. Now I'm the oldest guy in the meeting. So I get a couple of guys on the phone to make me feel young. Let me bring first and foremost, one of the great honors in my life has been to work with the one who has taken the mantle as well as the name and legacy of his father. Martin Luther King III and I have worked together for decades now. We've been to jail together in St. Louis fighting for contractors, stood together in this town bringing hundreds of thousands together for voting rights, gone and dealt in the White House, from the White House to the jailhouse. Our friendship has been there. And he has shown great leadership, great vision, and great discipline. One of the things that I most am grateful for is he helped bond his mother and I. And Mrs. King used to always say, Al, you got that northern thing, you need to calm down, don't be too, because I'd see someone on TV run out the door and call a march halfway down the block. She'd, calm down, Al. It's a science to organizing. And I believe that he has continued that unlike none other. As I bring him to the stage, I want you to know that we have a special gift from the King family. First of all, his wife is with him, Andrea Stan. Her birthday was this week. And we're so happy on her birthday week she was there. And then my leader, the superstar of the family, Yolanda, the grandchild of Dr. King, is with us. So we have all the Kings with us. And I think that it is noteworthy 2 years ago when Donald Trump was inaugurated yesterday, 2 years ago, Mr. Biden, we marched here in Washington. It was sleeting that day. We had the We Will Not Go Back march. Martin III called me and said, I'm on my way to Washington, but Mr. Trump is invited me to talk to him. What do you think I should do? I said, well, the King way is to talk. I'm gonna walk while you talk, because walking and talking is what we do. You know how I come out of Brownsville. They had the good cop, bad cop. I'll be the bad cop, even though we were sleeping outside. And he tried to reason with him. He gave him the benefit of the doubt. Now, I've known Donald Trump 35 years, and I gave up on the doubt side a long time ago, but I felt if anybody could talk to him, Martin would. The answers have been, today, he's not only not meeting with Martin, he's not even discussing his daddy at an official ceremony. But I give Martin the credit for doing what his parents taught him. Always extend yourself and let the other person show who they are. He is here with us, like I said, from jail cells on. We've been together, National Action Network. May we hear words from the oldest child, the son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King III.
Good morning, and let me thank God for the wonderful opportunity to be back in Washington as we observed the 33rd federal holiday. On last Tuesday, my father would have been 90 years old, January 15th. It's sort of challenging to even imagine that because he did not live to see 40. But my family and I are so honored to be here this morning for the National Action Network and to thank Reverend Sharpton for what he does every day, keeping it real for all of us throughout our nation and our communities. Whenever I get to this period, it always is reflective. This year is probably more reflective than ever. Because I wonder what my father would be thinking and ask. Especially since we have an administration and administrators. And Rev said the vice president I forget exactly what you said, Rev, but the vice president attempted to compare the president to Martin Luther King Jr. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. was a bridge builder, not a wall builder. Martin Luther King Jr. would say, love, not hate, will make America great. Did y'all hear that? Love, not hate, will make America great. See, we hadn't achieved, we've had spurts of greatness. In 1986, when President Reagan, when the first federal holiday was observed, we celebrated. In 2009, when President Obama was inaugurated and Vice President Biden, we celebrated. We've had spurts of celebration, but I don't know how we celebrate when everyday workers can't work right now. Aren't y'all concerned? Y'all should be concerned. The Coast Guard isn't even getting paid. The folks that are the first line of defense. And don't nobody seem to care. There's something wrong with that, and I apologize for my passion. But it bothers me that people who live check to check, and many of us have to go through airports today, and every day, less and less folk are showing up. And I don't blame them. Yes, I wish they could come, but they got to figure out how to make ends meet because the government is shut down. So we observe Dr. King's birthday. We don't celebrate. We can't celebrate as long as there's police brutality and misconduct. We can't celebrate as long as women make less than men for doing the same job. We can't celebrate as long as children are being divided from their families. They may never be reconnected. But you know what? I will never lose hope. My dad said the one institution that keeps the flame of hope burning and alive is the church. That was true in 55 when he said it. It was true in 65 when we got the Voting Rights Act. It was true even in 2019. Now it's true, and it'll be true to the end of time. Churches have got to come together. Synagogues have got to come together. Mosques have got to come together. Every area is where we worship. And even people who may not even believe, we are better than the behavior we're exhibiting. America is far better. Dad showed us it only takes a few good men and women to bring about change. So no matter what our conditions are, I am no ways tired. And I hope you are not. Why? Because we've come much too far from where we started. You see, no one ever told us that our roads would be easy. But I know our God did not bring us this far to leave us. Thank you, National Action Network.
Martin Luther King III. Let us now hear when Martin talked about the church, and National Action Network is a church-based direct action organization, but we work across lines. Rabbi Pessner Stan, our partner, we did the 1,000 Ministers March here last year that ended up 3,000, and he brought 300 rabbis. And they are our guests also this morning, where we're part of each other. A whole couple of tables of our rabbi friends are with us that march with us. And, you know, you and I haven't been to jail together yet. We got to really bond. But I have somebody that can arrange it, the Mayor of Washington, D.C. Let us hear Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am just delighted to see you and to welcome you to Washington, D.C., to Martin Luther King and his beautiful family. Thank you for being here. And as I sat there looking at your beautiful daughter, I thought, can you imagine what it is that Martin Luther King Jr. was your grandfather? And you get to see your father stand up and talk about a national celebration in honor of a man who began his sacrifice for our country at the ripe old age of 26. What a remarkable legacy. Please help me appreciate the King family once again. And Reverend Al, was just telling your daughter, as I was getting dressed, I was watching you on Morning Joe, and then here you are here in Washington, D.C. So feel free to tell all your friends at MSNBC you can do your show right here in D.C. You're more than welcome. Mr. Vice President, welcome back to your second home. We're always happy to have you here. And I always like to tell my friend Mayor Bloomberg, welcome to the best city in the world. So, with that being said, I just want everybody to know I speak for the more than 700,000 of us that call Washington, D.C. home, how appreciative we are of the National Action Network, not just on the King Celebration Day, but on the many events that Reverend Al hosts, including lobbying the Congress and marching for the rights of every American. We know that the National Action Network is focused on the things that cities like ours need and require and are going to need even more in the coming months. There cannot be one standard of decency or equal opportunity for people who are growing up and paying taxes in Washington, D.C., and Reverend Al and Dr. King stood with Washingtonians to demand statehood for Washington, D.C. In fact, Dr. King, 50 years ago, was among the voices who said that Washingtonians in our city should not be treated than any other representative democracy in the world. And now, selfishly, when we go to the Tidal Basin and look up at the beautiful statue of Dr. King, we know that in addition to challenging all of us for racial equity and economic justice, he's also standing guard to wait for Washingtonians to become the 51st state in our union. We are calling, and we're especially concerned as Americans around our nation are, 800,000 people not working because people call it a partial government shutdown. I call it a lockout. People who want to work, who should be working, who have jobs that are essential to the functioning of our nation can't go to work. And our city has been in the spotlight because a lot of Washingtonians work for the federal government. We have 20 million visitors that come to our city every year. And we've stepped up where the federal government is shut down to pick up trash, to make sure that the National Mall is clean. But why can't people coming to Washington go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture? Because it's shut down. I stand with all Americans calling on the federal government to get back to work and separate it from our issues of comprehensive immigration reform. Open the government now. What we see in this year, in 2018, is how many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And the idea, the callousness, the heartlessness of putting their good credit, their good mental health, and their families' futures at stake because of this partisan bickering is certainly not the way that Dr. King taught us. And that is what we have to continue to focus on and not take for granted. The sturdiness of our American institutions is real, but we can see, even in cities as resilient as ours, how our people are being tested. I shared with Sherrilyn before we started, all of us probably have the experience of, that automatic debit of your mortgage, that when that happens every month. And you just put yourselves in the footsteps of these workers. The people of Washington allow me a great living, but when that mortgage payment hits on the 10th of January, I wouldn't, even me, be able to make up that few $1,000s. So this is what people are dealing with right now. When that automatic debit hit, they couldn't make their mortgage payments. And they wouldn't be able to make their child care payments or their car payments, all of the things that regular people with regular jobs are used to doing every single month. And this is what is at stake with this lockout of our federal government. So as we observe Dr. King's celebration day of service in our city, let us all remember that the things that we get elected to do, and if you're in a position where you're leading a big organization, at the end of the day, real people are affected by our decisions. So let us start this day, wherever we go today, and remember that we're called on to deliver for the people who put us here. God bless you all.
Give it up, Mayor Bowser. As I look around, I see McMorris now, board member. As I look around, I see a lot of people passing me notes of who to acknowledge. I want to acknowledge special guests, so would you turn to your right and shake hands with the person next to your right and say, "You are Reverend Al's special guest." All right, now, so don't send me no more notes. Everybody got their acknowledgement. Go on and eat and get outside and put your clothes on and bundle up, dog, because I ain't not read no more notes. This is about Dr. King's day. This is not your day. Talking about mayors, our next speaker was mayor of New York for many years. One of the things that Dr. King taught was how you can find common ground even if you may disagree on some issues. And when this person became mayor of New York, his predecessor was one that prided himself in not even meeting with people like the civil rights community in New York. We had various issues, and he would not even talk, not only with me, but leaders of those government agencies. The night that Michael Bloomberg won for mayor, a few hours after his victory, I got a call, and it was him on the phone. I was stunned. I had not talked to the sitting mayor in 8 years. And he was mayor-elect only a few hours. And he said to me, "Reverend Al, we're not going to always agree, but I'll always be accessible." And we met a couple of days later, and he can tell the story. And then he committed that every Martin Luther King Day I'm mayor, I will come to National Action Network House of Justice. And every day for 12 years, Martin Luther King Day, even when we was marching on him, he'd come to Martin Luther King Day. We disagreed on stop and frisk, but we agreed on education, and we agreed on many other issues. And I will never forget, I used to always talk about how Dr. King taught us how we must find that common ground, even if we disagree and really do disagree on issues. And Sherrilyn and all of us have disagreed on issues, but we never stopped talking, and we never became like the folks we were fighting. And I think that that is what is in the King spirit. Now, of course, he got even with me because in March of 2009, right after Barack Obama became president, he and I met with the president, and President Obama said to me, "I want you to tour the country, 5 cities on education, and the person you're going to tour with is Newt Gingrich." Bloomberg said, "Now we'll see how far you can reach out and reconcile." And for some reason, Bloomberg didn't make that tour. It was me and Newt. But I heard his passionate plea around climate change and around what's happening to the environment. And I heard some of the issues he was dealing with now. And I called and said, "You remember you used to spend King Day with us I think that no one could articulate where we are in terms of climate change and the environmental disproportionate impact in our community than someone that's unlikely in their minds and that might be likely doing something else. You know, I always have a little edge to my invitations. And he said, all right, I'll do it. And he, like many other King Days, is here. And we're glad that he is. The former mayor of the city of New York, the head of Bloomberg, what is it? Bloomberg Inc., Bloomberg, head of Bloomberg, Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you up there. Reverend Sharpton, happy King Day to everyone. It is great to be with you all, and also let me thank the Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser, for having us. My foundation's always been happy to work with the mayor on some big issues. I think she's doing an outstanding job. And it certainly is nice that in Washington, at least one executive knows how to keep a government open and running. But, Madam Mayor, I might point out that the House of Justice that the Reverend was talking about, that I went to every time, is located in New York City. Let me also acknowledge a great American who you'll hear from soon, my friend, Vice President Joe Biden. Whatever the next year brings for Joe and me, I know we'll both keep our eyes on the real prize, and that is electing a Democrat to the White House in 2020 and getting our country back on track. I haven't had a chance yet to talk to the Vice President at length today, but I did want to get some pointers from him of how it's like to live in Washington, D.C. I actually thought that was funnier than you did. As the Reverend Sharpton said, he and I go back a very long ways. I was elected in 2001. Racial tensions ran high in New York City. But I knew back then that if people couldn't work together, we would get nothing done in the city. And so as he pointed out, the night I was elected, I called him and I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" He told me that he was attending a dinner for a black civic group named 100 Black Men. It was a business group, and I asked whether I could stop by to publicly shake his hand in front of all the guests and the press just to send a message. And he said, of course, but you know, it's a big crowd. Maybe nobody will recognize the two of us together. I said sarcastically, I'm sure, Al, no one will notice either of us. Well, Reverend Sharpton couldn't not be noticed if he tried. And I point out he doesn't try very often. I went that night because I wanted to send a public message that as a new mayor, I was determined to bring the city together and to listen to community leaders who have been shut out of power for much too long. And after I was sworn in, I called Al to come down to the City Hall for a meeting so I could hear his views on the challenges that we were facing and what we should do about them. He said the last time that he was in the mayor's office, he was arrested for a sit-in at Ed Koch's desk. I pointed out that Ed has forgiven him so that I would as well. And when he arrived, I was standing on the steps of City Hall to greet him rather than him waiting for me. And we went through the front door together. And from the get-go, I was determined to ensure that City Hall would always be open to everyone. And while Reverend Sharpton and I disagree from time to time, even today, we certainly knew that we could do it without being disagreeable. When we had an issue in City Hall, I never hesitated to call him. And when he saw an issue around the city, he sure didn't hesitate to call me. Every year, I went to Martin Luther King Day with Al, just as I'm here this morning. And I can just tell you that I was always welcomed. Now, I was thinking about this breakfast when I was out in Tulsa, Oklahoma last week, and this is serious. I was there because my foundation had just given a grant to help that city commemorate the Black Wall Street massacre that took place there in the 1920s and that killed hundreds of African American African Americans. Black Wall Street was a thriving neighborhood in Tulsa, if you don't know, and it was destroyed violently by racism. But for decades, the whole thing has been swept under the rug. Now, I read a lot of history, and I'm sorry to say, like a lot of people, I never knew about it. It was one of the worst and deadliest racial outrages in American history. It's another example of an injustice that isn't well known or understood. And I think it is up to us to bring those stories out of the shadows so that they will never happen again. Over the last couple of years, we've heard a lot of people on the right say, when talking about Civil War statues, you can't erase history. But what about all the history we haven't taught? What about all the injustice that Americans don't know about? The massacres, the lynchings, and the rapes. We don't need to erase history. We need to face up to history. And we need to decide which statues reflect the people and events that we want to honor as a country. When I think of the lessons Dr. King taught us, I often think back to something my father taught me when I was a young boy. I remember at the kitchen table watching him write out a check to the NAACP for what for him was a lot of money. I asked him, "Dad, why are you writing this check?" And he told me, because discrimination against anyone is a threat to all of us. If you accept it for others, he explained to me, you should expect it for yourself. Dr. King expressed that idea so powerfully in his letter from a Birmingham jail. He wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Now, my father died 12 days after Dr. King wrote those words, but I know that he and my mother couldn't have agreed more. And when I think of what I've done in my life that would have made my father most proud had he lived to an old age, it would not have been my success in business or being mayor of New York City. It would have been the work that he and my mother taught me and my sister to do, to help others, to right wrongs, to fight injustice, and to stand up for what you think is right, even when others disagree. Now, I think it's fair to say that while important progress has been made towards realizing Dr. King's dream, the pace of progress is still too slow. But there's not a doubt in my mind that it's possible to accelerate the pace, because I've seen it happen. In New York City, Reverend Sharpton and I worked together on many civil rights challenges where we jump-started and accelerated progress, beginning with education. Now, I know this will shock you, but when I was elected, surprise, surprise, schools in poor neighborhoods had been neglected and underfunded for decades. Changing that was one of the main reasons that I decided to run for mayor, and we did change it. And thanks to the strong support we got from Reverend Sharpton and many others, we really made a difference. We believe that every child, regardless of color, could learn and could achieve. And we insisted that every child, regardless of color, must have the chance to attend a quality school. No exceptions, no excuses. I've always believed that the best way to reduce poverty is to prevent it in the first place. And that starts with teaching our children the skills and knowledge they need to pursue their dreams. So we closed schools that have been failing mostly minority communities for decades. And we opened new ones in their place that outperformed the old schools. We gave New York City teachers a 43% raise to attract and retain the very best. And we more than doubled the education budget while I was in office. We also got some important help from President Obama, who worked closely with his team and us on New York's Race to the Top application. and which helped us raise standards and increase quality school options, including charters, for families who had long lacked them. All of this work helped us increase graduation rates by 42% and substantially reduce the racial achievement gap. You should also know that since leaving office, I have made education and access to college a major focus of my philanthropy's work, and we've accelerated progress there too. But as Dr. King would have been the first to say, we still aren't moving fast enough. In fact, I think if he had seen the progress, the little progress that we've made in giving all minority children a sufficient education to succeed over the past 4 years, he would be shocked at how little has changed. And I think the same is true for other issues that the Reverend Sharpton and I worked on, including another problem that will not surprise you, and that's the environment, as the Reverend mentioned. The worst air pollution in New York City was in poor Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. You know this if you live there. Children from those neighborhoods suffer much higher asthma rates than white children do. So we eliminated a lot of the dirty heating oil, built new parks, and reformed the garbage hauling system. Instead of having all the city's garbage trucked through the poorest neighborhoods, we spread the burden more equally and reduced pollution across all 5 boroughs. And when I left office, New York City's air was cleaner than it had been in 50 years. And clean air and clean water should be a right that is protected for every American and every community. Reverend Sharpton and I also saw that we could accelerate progress in juvenile justice. Together we worked to reduce the number of kids held in the city's detention centers by more than 40%. And we closed down upstate juvenile prisons that were located so far away, relatives couldn't get there to visit their families. We brought young people together back home to their families and their schools, and where they'd have a better chance of getting their lives back on track. There's one other issue Reverend Sharpton and I worked on that I'd like to touch on before I finish this morning, because I think it's impossible to mark Dr. King's birthday without remembering how he died. 8 years ago, around MLK weekend, we held a gun violence prevention event in City Hall with family members who had lost loved ones. And we were honored to join by Martin Luther King III. We talked about it before the speech. It was one of the most moving events I've ever been part of. I didn't know famous people like the Reverend or Martin Luther King or Martin Luther King Jr. or Martin Luther King III. Had Dr. King lived, I have no doubt he would have made gun violence an important part of his life. And I have no doubt he would have been at the very front of the National March for Our Lives last year. But his spirit was with all the millions who marched and rallied, including so many young people, like Nate Tinbike, who you meet later this morning, and a very special 9-year-old, Dr. King's granddaughter, Yolanda. Yolanda, you've just got to learn how to be forward and not be shy anymore. You were beaming when you jumped up faster than your mother did. Yolanda once said, "I have a dream that enough is enough." And I've spent enough time in churches over the years to say, amen. Dr. King is still our drum major for justice. And as we celebrate his birthday, let's remember that to truly honor the way he lived, we must redeem the way he died. Now, as many of you know, I've been fighting gun violence and the NRA for many years, spending hundreds of millions of dollars of my own money and traveling around this country rallying voters of gun safety candidates and causes. And I'm glad to say I have never seen more energy behind the movement than I see right now. It's a movement that I think Dr. King would have been proud of. Every color, every gender, every religion, every background. We're making real progress, and I'm happy to say in both blue and red states. And here in Washington, the Democratic House that many of us worked to elect has already introduced a universal background check bill. I think Dr. King would have been especially proud to see the election of an African-American woman named Lucy McBath from a district just outside his hometown of Atlanta. Lucy lost her son to a senseless shooting, but she turned her grief into activism and became a volunteer leader in a group I've supported named Moms Demand Action. This year, she ran for Congress, and I helped pay for radio and television and direct mail ads that I think had something to do with her success. Not a lot of experts thought she would win, but she did, in a district that had once elected Newt Gingrich. So thank you. Yes, just a round of applause for that. So thanks to Lucy and many others like her, our movement is on the march. Over the years, I've spoken with so many people who've lost family members to gunshots, and I can tell you, those talks never get any easier. When I was mayor, an innocent young African-American named Sean Bell, who was wrongly shot and killed by New York City police the night before his wedding. When it happened, I called the Reverend Sharpton and I said, Al, I want to meet with his family and fiancé to apologize, to accept responsibility for the city, and to promise them I would do everything in my power to prevent a tragedy like this from ever happening again. I have never walked away from something I believe in, and I've never advocated for something I didn't put my heart into delivering. And I knew in this case, it wouldn't ease their pain, but it was the least I could do. Now, I can't stand up here and tell you that every decision I've made as mayor was perfect. I listened to concerns and I tried to be responsive. But I can tell you we were always guided by the goal, first and foremost in all cases, of saving lives of those who face the greatest risk of gun violence, young men of color. And by cutting murders in half, I'm glad to say some 1,600 people are alive today who otherwise would not be. And most are young men from Black and Hispanic communities. Others are young children, teenagers, grandparents, mothers and fathers. Thankfully, they were not killed simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. I can't tell you the names, but I can tell you that all across America, there are still far too many people who aren't so lucky, and far too many politicians who don't seem to give a damn about them. They care more about politics and getting reelected than saving lives. I'm not going to accept that, and I hope you won't either. And it's up to all of us to take up this fight and to start bending the arc of justice, the arc of justice faster than we ever have before. So tomorrow, let's get back to work, and let's honor the way Dr. King lived by saving others from the way he died. Thank you, and God bless.
Michael Bloomberg. I'm going to present our honorees, and I want you to respect that as well as our youth honoree. And we, again, this is a breakfast. They will make short acceptances, and then we will hear from the last one. This is a breakfast, not a luncheon. We're not going to be here till lunchtime. I know some preachers have breakfasts that end up luncheons. I'm not one of them. I'll be in New York by lunch. As we have talked about the government shutdown, let us remember that the government workers have a union that have fought for them and worked for them and stood with them throughout the years. No time like this time do we need the American Federation of Government Employees, because their strength and organizing ability is what I believe will ultimately keep the pressure on the Congress to force this president to do the right thing. Even before the shutdown or the shutout, we had asked Everett to become one of our honorees this year because of his tireless work around voting in Florida, around protecting workers' rights. No one symbolizes fighting for working people, government workers, than Everett Kelly. No one is more needed today in the 31st day of this shutdown than the Everett Kellys of this country. Will you help me in saluting from the American Federation of Government Employees, our first honoree, Everett Kelly. Come on.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. First of all, to Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network, to my esteemed cohorts of honorees, to my AFGE family, my beloved wife, Elizabeth, and other distinguished guests. All of you that are here on this commemorative occasion, good morning. I am humbled and honored to receive this prestigious award. Not only is this a notable achievement, but it is even more special as I am receiving this award in honor of a man who had a dream in which he hoped for the realization of equality and justice for all people. 51 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stated the following words: I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face this difficult of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Even now, these words still have a resounding effect on those who hear them. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man wise beyond measure, for he knew that every triumph there would be trials, that every joy there would be pain, and with sunshine there would be rain. But with hope, faith, and perseverance, we're all able to press toward this mark together. As the National Secretary-Treasurer of American Federation of Government Employees, I know too well that too many people, especially our federal employees, are currently facing difficulties that could be avoided. I received an email after my interview and they said, you should be ashamed, laying the blame on our president. I said, look, the president took ownership for this shutdown. And so should you. I'm here to tell you, my brothers and sisters, that I believe this work that we do is God's work. I believe it because I remember a question was asked, said, when have I seen you hungry and did not feed you? When have I seen you naked and did not clothe you? He said, listen, the greatest teacher of all said this. He said, if you did it to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. So I believe this to be God's work. And I'm here to tell you today, as long as breath is in my body, I will fight this fight. I believe that God is still looking for a people that will go and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. I submit to us today that we all are part of this movement, and we must tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Thank you for this award. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. I love you, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Everett Kelly, government workers. I've been in the civil rights movement since I was 12, and I've met many that I've worked with. Some, to be candid, I've liked, some I've loved, some I didn't like at all. But you have to work with them. And those that are on the field for the last several years, as I look around, Spencer Overton and so many that are with us and fight with us every day. There's none. Melanie Campbell of Black Women's Roundtable is with us. Mr. Civil Rights from the NAACP is with us. There's none that I respect more and like, but respect, than our next awardee, because she speaks what she means, and she is ready to fight in her lane that is unequaled by anyone else. We all don't do civil rights the same way, but if we do our way to the best that we can, then it makes the whole highway progress. And I've watched in coalition meetings, meetings at the White House, or meetings wherever we were, that everyone knows when she comes in the room, you better be ready, because she's ready. She has taken a historic organization and breathed new life in it. And because of that, it has breathed new life in the civil rights community. We have a long way to go, but we would be further back if we did not have this tenacious, committed, hard-working, self-sacrificing shero named Sherrilyn Ifill at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. May you join me in honoring Sherrilyn Ifill.
Good morning and thank you. So I'm told I have 4 minutes, and they seem like they wanted to cut to 3, but I'm taking my full 4. I'm the only woman getting who's an honoree this morning. I lead a civil rights organization, and we are in a moment that requires me to give you some work, some assignments, so I'm gonna do that. Right. So I'm gonna take the first few seconds just to say thank you to all of you for being here to acknowledge Reverend Sharpton and your extraordinary work and your commitment to constantly bringing us together, which is so important, especially at this moment. I keep telling people we have to come out and see one another at this time in this country to remember that there are more of us than there are of them, and so I thank you for that. The King family, I just have to acknowledge you, your sacrifice, your extraordinary work. Many of us set ourselves on the path to become civil rights activists and lawyers because of the extraordinary work of your dad. I'm one of them. Long before there was an Eyes on the Prize, there was King from Montgomery to Memphis, and my father made us watch it every year. And so I thank you so much, and I acknowledge your sacrifice and your work. To Vice President Biden, to Mayor Bowser, to Mayor Bloomberg, to all of the mayors and officials who are here, I acknowledge you as well. There is a thing called public service. I know people pretend that it doesn't exist, but it is real, and you all are examples of what that is, and I thank you for it. I had a nonpartisan organization. I don't shill for candidates, so I acknowledge your service. It's not an endorsement, but I am happy that there will be a field of competent, ethical candidates running for the presidency this year. I want to acknowledge my board member who's here, Tony West. Where's Tony West? General Counsel at Uber, there he is. This morning, his sister-in-law, Kamala Harris, announced that she's running for president as well. And I want to, by name, acknowledge my civil rights leadership colleagues, Vanita Gupta, head of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, Kristen Clark, head of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. I think they're yonder. Melanie Campbell is here. We talked about Spencer Overton, Hillary Shelton, all of you who are in the room. And it's really important because at this very difficult time, these are the people that we walk. When we went to go see Jeff Sessions, only once, these are the people who stood shoulder to shoulder with Reverend Sharpton in that room to face down these difficult moments. And their competence, their intelligence, their commitment, their ethics, and their energy, this is exhausting at this moment, really makes it possible to do this extraordinary work. So let me take 1 minute and tell you a story, because sometimes we forget how we got over and where we came from. In 1949, a man named Bill Coleman was the first African American to serve as a clerk on the United States Supreme Court. He was a clerk to Justice Felix Frankfurter. And Bill Coleman became the lawyer's lawyer. He later became the chair of the board of the Legal Defense Fund. He was brought in to the work of Brown versus Board of Education by Thurgood Marshall. He was part of those lawyers who were in the brain trust. They didn't work at LDF. They were partners at law firms and law professors, but they were part of the brain trust, and he was one of them. First African-American clerk of the United States Supreme Court. And one holiday, he was working for his justice, and all the clerks decided that they were going to go down and have lunch at the Mayflower Hotel. And he said, "I'll join you in 10 minutes. And his best friend, co-clerk Elliot Richardson, a name that we've been hearing a lot lately, reminding ourselves of, Elliot Richardson said, "I'll wait for you." And when Bill Coleman came out, Elliot Richardson said, "Listen, why don't we just go over to Union Station? It's closer, we have so much work to do, let's just eat there and go back." And Bill Coleman said, fine. So they went to Union Station and they ate. And only when he got back to the chambers did he learn that his friend Elliot Richardson had actually called over to the Mayflower Hotel and learned that they would not serve black people. And that's why they went to Union Station. And it took a case in 1953, DC versus Thompson, to ensure that all DC facilities had to serve African Americans. So as we look around this room, I want you to remember it wasn't always like this, and that it takes the work of civil rights lawyers to move us forward as well. Okay, I told you I had assignments. Here's the assignments. Take out your phone, a pen. I'm totally not playing, because this is a Martin Luther King Day commemoration, and you have to work. So the first thing you have to work on is dealing with the government shutdown. This is McConnell's shutdown. I know people say Trump shutdown. I say McConnell shutdown. And that means that you have to call your senator, and you have to tell your senator to tell McConnell to vote on the bills that have already been passed by the House and that the Senate had previously approved of that would reopen the government. You don't know what your senator's phone number is? You're going to call 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. And they're going to tell you, they're going to connect you, so the switchboard will connect you with your senator. You're going to take that number, you're going to text it to your family members who live in other states, and you're going to tell them to tell their senators to call Senator McConnell and tell him that the United States Senate does not belong to the President of the United States. That the United States Congress has to vote on bills whether or not the President likes it. And this government has to be reopened. While you're on that line, you can also tell your senator that they should be opposing this Attorney General nominee, William Barr. We heard a lot last week about where he stands on the Mueller investigation, but we care about where he stands on civil rights, and where he stands on civil rights is not where we stand on civil rights. This is a man who wrote an article called "The Case for More Incarceration." This is not the Attorney General you want, so make sure your senator knows that. Number two, I need you to support the bill that has been introduced in the House of Representatives, H.R. 1. It is a comprehensive voting rights bill, and we must restore the strength of the Voting Rights Act. Everything that you have seen around voter suppression, it is no longer in the South. It has jumped the shark. It has metastasized. It is in Wisconsin. It is in Kansas. It is in North Dakota. It is all over the country. And we now need a comprehensive fix to the Voting Rights Act to reverse the harm of the Shelby County versus Holder decision from the Supreme Court in 2013. Listen, this is important. H.R. 1 is easy to remember. So you're asking your representative about H.R. 1. We need a fix to the Voting Rights Act. And then finally, I'm asking you to vote. Now listen, I know when I say that, people are thinking about the presidential race. Maybe they're thinking about a Senate race. Maybe they're thinking about their mayoral race. And this is why we give away political power. There are not elections in this country every 2 years. There are not elections every 4 years. There are elections every year. Maybe that election is for the railroad commissioner, the school board, the town council, the county commission, the constable, the justices of the peace. That is where power is developed. And we have failed to exercise our right to vote in every one of those elections. If you're honest with yourself, you go into the booth, you vote for the governor, you vote for the mayor, maybe you vote for your city council member, then you're not really sure about the DA candidates. So maybe you pick one because of the political party. Then you look at the sheriff candidates. You don't know who they are, so you don't vote. Maybe the judicial races say pick 3, and you don't know who any of them are, so you don't vote in that election. I want that to stop today. I want you to vow to yourself. I want you to stop telling young people that Martin Luther King Jr. died for their vote and that they have to vote when you don't even vote in every race. That ends today. Decide that if we are going to have true political power, if we are truly going to live up to the sacrifice of those who came before us, that we will cast that ballot not only to vote in every election, but for every race and build political power from the ground up. And here's the last thing. I'm a lawyer. I know it's boring. I know people don't like to hear about civil rights lawyers. I'm not a preacher. Preachers are fantastic. They're exciting. But listen to me. The courts are critical. They are critical. The reason we're sitting in this room having this breakfast is because of the work of civil rights lawyers in the courts. So we need you to support us. We need you to pay attention to the Supreme Court. We need you to go on our websites. I need you to follow me on Twitter. I need you to keep up and know what I'm talking about when I start telling you about these cases that are coming down. The Supreme Court's getting ready to rule on gerrymandering. They're ruling on a case involving a man who was tried 6 times by a DA in Mississippi. 6 times. They're ruling on cases involving black people being excluded from juries. This is our lives. So I need you to pay attention. I know I can count on you. Eat your breakfast. Get to work. Thank you.
Sherrilyn, Ifill. There are those that serve in public office, and then there are those that are public servants. Many are in office or in position to be served. Others are there to be of service. No one has shown America more the example and personification of public service than Joe Biden. He's taken on the tough issues. He stood when it was popular and when it was unpopular. He's been solid, and he's been a person that did not mind being out front or being secondary. It didn't matter as long as we were moving in the right direction. That is why Barack Obama chose him twice to be his partner in the White House. And that is why many of us saw a man that would take down and put his shoulder to the wheel to move America forward. And when I look around and see this audience, and I look and I see those that have different persuasions politically and regionally. That's my friend Nate Miles from the Northwest that helps us. And I've not found one that has not had the respect for this person. I took the train down yesterday because of the weather. And it's funny, many of you know when I was younger, James Brown took me as a son, and he would take me on the road with him. Some of the folks thought I was his manager, but I really wasn't. But I would just hang out with him. He liked my civil rights work. And I kept things after he passed, and one of the things he had was a little folder with his initials. So when I got off the train yesterday, one of the people at Union Station said, "I told you he was running." And the guy said, "What do you mean?" He said, "There go Rev Mal, he got a JB thing. Joe Biden is running, y'all." So Rev Mal already traveling for JB. He didn't know that was from 30 years ago, James Brown. So my journey has brought me from the godfather of soul to the godfather of pole, Vice President Joe Biden.
You're something else, man. You're something else. Well, I have an announcement to make. I'm not one of the famous flames. Those of you who know James Brown. Good morning, everyone. Rev, thank you for that introduction. Folks, you're looking at the one title I can claim is I am Mr. Amtrak. When I travel, I tell you, they keep, as the press will tell you, they keep fastidious records of how many miles you fly in an Air Force plane. And about 6.5 years in, the headlines in the paper was Biden travels over 1 million miles in Air Force Two. And I tried to go home to see my mom every Friday, and I didn't want to take that G5. It cost too much money. I'd take the train. The Secret Service didn't like that. They thought it was more dangerous. And so I'm getting on the train, and a guy named Angelo Negri, one of the senior guys in the road, I've been riding since 1973, came up and he grabbed me and said, Joey, Joey, grabbed my cheek. I thought the Secret Service was going to shoot him. And he said, Joey, 1 million miles, big deal. He said, you know, the boys and I sat down and figured out how many miles you've traveled on Amtrak. I said, you did, Angie? He said, yeah, average 119 days a year for 36 years. Then as vice president, we figure it's 8,210 round trips, 259 miles a day. Joey, you've traveled over 2 million miles on Amtrak. I don't want to hear any more about Air Force Two. So, folks, ride Amtrak. Look, let me be quick and get to the point. Everybody knows today and about looking back on the legacy of your dad. It's about carrying that legacy forward. In October, I was invited to the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis to receive the Freedom Award, a thing when I sat in black churches on the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I never, ever thought in my life I would be worthy of, and I'm still not sure I'm worthy of it. But I stood in that balcony in Lorraine Motel where your dad was assassinated. And it brought me back to that moment in 1968. The balcony leads back into Dr. King's room, and nothing's changed. The beds are still unmade. The coffee cups are still scattered around the room. And when you walk in, you can feel that restless spirit. I mean, you can feel it. You can taste it. It's still in the room of a dream deferred, of unfinished business. The night before your dad, as you well know, Martin, was assassinated, he stood in the pulpit in Mason Temple talking to 2,000 people. What was he talking about? It was a strike, it was about wage, but it was ultimately about dignity. He was insisting that these garbage workers be treated with dignity. Dignity. And ladies and gentlemen, the fact of the matter is that many of you remember exactly what he said. It may not have been the last sentence, but it was close to the last sentence. He said, let us move on in these powerful days, these days of challenge, to make America what it ought to be. To make America what it ought to be. We all know what it ought to be. That was among his last words spoken. To make America what it ought to be. America's been made better. All the struggles many of you in this room have endured and led. But we've learned in the last 2 years, it doesn't take much to awaken hate, to bring those folks out from under the rocks, that part of American society that's always been there, will always be there, but has been legitimized. 50 years later, the hate that cut your dad down is still nurtured by those forces of darkness. We saw it in Charlottesville as Klansmen and white supremacists literally, and neo-Nazis, literally slunked out of their dark rooms, their digital hideaways, their crazed and vicious faces, literally contorted, illuminated by torchlight. Could make up a Hollywood movie like that in a historic city and confronted by decent, honorable Americans who said, "This is not us." Dr. King knows those faces well, those same lost souls that once stood like cowards, hooded behind burning crosses. They have been deliberately reawakened again, those forces. It's not an accident. They have been deliberately reawakened again. Unearthed by loose talk, by direct appeals to prejudice from the alt-right. And then something I never thought I would live to see again, having a president of the United States make a moral equivalence between those who were spreading the hate and those who were opposing it, saying there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. No presidents of the Civil War have ever uttered words like that. One thing we know for certain, we've learned it over and over again through history, whether it's the Holocaust or the Civil Rights Movement, silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. And so we have to do what you've been doing, Rev, and you've been doing at the NAACP, but everybody's been doing in this room for a long time. We have to speak out. We have to challenge these forces of hate and stand up and simply say what the vast majority of Americans agreed to. This is not our America. No, we're for real, not applaud. This is not who we are. This is not the image we wish to spread around the world, which is happening. This is not who we are, because it's not who we are. Years ago, there used to be a poll tax. Now, as our last speaker pointed out, just last year, 24 states introduced or enacted at least 70 bills to make it harder for people to vote. They now use the voter ID laws like the poll tax used to be used, simply designed to keep people from being able to vote. We saw it in Georgia in the governor's race. We saw it in Florida. We saw it in other parts of the country. 2017. These guys never give up. We knew that. They never will give up. It's like cutting grass, man. You cut it, it looks nice, but you let it go for a while, it gets a little ugly, then it grows into a forest again. We can't let this happen. You know, I've been in this fight for a long time. It goes not just to voting rights, it goes to the criminal justice system. I haven't always been right. I know we haven't always gotten things right, but I've always tried. Rev, it was your help back in 2010 that Barack and I finally reduced the disparity in sentencing, which we've been fighting to eliminate, in crack cocaine versus powder cocaine. It was a big mistake when it was made. We were told by the experts that crack, you never go back. It was somehow fundamentally different. It's not different, but it's trapped an entire generation. As vice president, I saw firsthand the courage of Barack, the president. He's my buddy. No, he really is my buddy. All those memes are true, except he did the first friendship bracelet, not me. But every day, I've always been proud of his courage. Never more than when he commuted over 1,700 sentences, more than the past 13 presidents in a row. I was proud that our reforms have helped federal prison population be reduced by 38,000 people. Well, most people don't know 91% of all the people kept in prison are in state prisons. They're not in federal prisons. That's where the overcrowding is, in state prisons. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to say to the states, no more. No more mandatory sentences. Enough is enough is enough. We should be reducing those sentences. And folks, look, and federally, we need to once again and finally for all eliminate all the disparity between crack and powder. We need the legacy of debtor prisons, and we have a legacy of debtor prisons called cash bail. My daughter runs the Delaware Criminal Justice Center. She's been fighting for 2 years. Finally, the Attorney General of Delaware just announced they're going to eliminate cash bail in the state of Delaware. It can be done. Folks, the fact of the matter is that the bottom line is we have a lot to root out, but most of all, there's systematic racism that most of us whites don't like to acknowledge even exists. We don't even consciously acknowledge it, but it's been built into every aspect of our system. Because when your schools are substandard, when your houses are undervalued, when your car insurance costs more for no apparent reason, when poverty rates for black Americans is still twice that of white Americans, when Barack says if your name is Jamal and your name is Jim, and you have the same qualifications and Jim gets the job, there's something we have to admit, not you, we. White America has to admit there still is systematic racism. And it goes almost unnoticed by so many of us. When all that is surrounding us, is it any wonder that there is still that spirit of restlessness out there? How do we ensure that every American can live a life of dignity? How do we fulfill the promise that working people who still go to bed like my dad used to, staring at the ceiling, thinking, God, if I get prostate cancer, or if my wife gets breast cancer, we lose everything. We lose single biggest reason for bankruptcy. We lose everything. How can we stand by guaranteeing that every single American can get affordable health care and medications because your health shouldn't depend on the color of your skin or your zip code? But it does. One study found that there are 30 million U.S. jobs waiting to be filled that don't need a college degree, a bachelor's degree. When I wrote for the president a year of study of the jobs of the future, right then and there were 100,000 factory jobs going unfilled for high tech because we didn't train people for those skills. The average salary, according to this study, is $55,000 a year. 30 million U.S. jobs that don't require a bachelor's degree that pay $55,000 a year. Whether it's college, trade school, certificate, apprenticeships, community colleges, 6-week coding programs, every single solitary child is capable of doing something consequential and filling these jobs. It's not rocket science. No, it really isn't. It's an absolute simple commitment. Folks, what the hell are we arguing about a $15 minimum wage for? Why is it even a question? No, real. Below that rate, you're below the poverty level. People working, busting their necks. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to eliminate, which you probably don't even realize, there's 40 million people out there have to sign a non-compete agreement. You work for the equivalent of a Wendy's. You can't go to work, you can't compete and go to work for McDonald's if they pay you 5 cents more. The fact of the matter is that these are hourly jobs. People are having to sign non-compete agreements. What the heck are we doing? Folks, we need better public transportation and so much more that will literally change the lives of ordinary people, black, Hispanic, and some whites as well. Rev, I'm optimistic. The reason I am, and I'll end on this, is I know I was always referred to, as the mayor knows, as the White House optimist. I always kind of liked that. It made me look like I was the young guy. But they're longer than all of them. As my grandfather would say, I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. But folks, new generation of millennials, those born after 1980, a study at Georgetown University showed not only are they the best educated, the most engaged, They are also the least prejudiced generation in American history. And they have been awakened, like my generation was by your father. They have been awakened. Ladies and gentlemen, over 60% of this millennial generation believe that increasing, not accepting, increasing diversity is good for them and good for America. That has never, ever happened in any polling in American history. So folks, we got a whole army out there that's ready. I said to the Rev, or I said to you, Martin, think about how things have changed. Turn on the television. How many biracial ads do you see? They're no, I'm serious. They're normal. They're normal. What's behind is our government. What's behind is these people of prejudice have found their voice again. And ladies and gentlemen, we've never come this close before. They've been awakened, they're ready to speak, they're ready to vote, they're ready to win. And all of a sudden, 10 years ago, when people tell me things can't change, 10 years ago yesterday, Rev, I stood on a platform in Wilmington, Delaware at the Amtrak station. And I was at the end of the platform, what we call overlooking the 3rd Street Bridge, neighborhood I used to represent as a public defender in Southeast Wilmington. I got back from law school and I had a job with a white shoe law firm, but because my state was the only state in American history, my city occupied by the National Guard since Reconstruction for 9 months, I quit my job and I became a public defender. I used to go down in those neighborhoods, as you know, you've been there with me, and interview folks. As I looked out, I'm standing there with my 2 sons and my daughter and my wife, waiting for a train. I looked out over what used to be, I remember, there are now houses there now, but there are vacant lots where kids used to play, people used to live. And I thought things would never get better again because they'd been burned to the ground. Never get better. And here I was, and it just hit me, standing, waiting for a black man to come 28 miles from Philadelphia to pick me up and take me on a 128-mile ride to be sworn in as President and Vice President of the United States. Don't tell me things can't change. Don't tell me it can't change. So folks, you know, I apologize, I've gone too long, but my friend Reverend Barber put it this way. It isn't enough, he said, just to remember Dr. King. He said we have to, quote, reach down in the blood, pick up the baton, and carry it the rest of the way. I know that's metaphorical, but it is literally true. The next generation is coming to carry it forward. So don't tell me there's no reason for hope. I've never been more optimistic than I am today. I still believe that dreams within our reach. As your dad said, let's move on in these powerful days and America, make America what it ought to be. Because in fact, it can be. Please, please, please don't give up hope.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to present what I believe and I feel is the most important award. It's the Youth Award. And this young man is amazing. The Youth Award is designed to highlight a young person who has shown outstanding character and leadership within the community. Nate Tinbyte is a 16-year-old from Montgomery County, Maryland. Currently serves as the president of the Montgomery County Student Government Association, leading the district's 163,000 students to fight for English language learner programs funding and frank classroom discussions. He is a young leader. Nate is also one of the founding members of the Montgomery County Students for Change and Advocacy organization that in 2018 led 5,000 student walkout to the steps of the U.S. Capitol to protest gun violence. Earlier this year, he co-led a district-wide high school voter registration drive that registered 3,000 high school students in 4 weeks and is currently working in Maryland state legislature to pass a law mandating at least one voter registration drive in Maryland high school annually. This is a 16-year-old young man. You know, Bobby Kennedy said the future does not belong to those who are fearful of bold projects and new ideas, but rather the future belongs to those who can blend passion, reason, and courage into a personal commitment to the great ideals and enterprise of American society. Nate Tinbyte represents the best of America. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present the 2019 Youth Award to Nate Tinbyte. Come on up. Come on, Nate. Come bless us with a few words.
Good morning. Thank you, Hill Harper and Mary Pat Hector, for the introduction and the amazing work that you two have done throughout these past few months and years. Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network, for using your platforms towards fighting for equality and social justice in many underrepresented communities. Once again, my name is Nate Tinbyte. I'm a junior at Kennedy High School in Montgomery County, Maryland. In truth, I could have never imagined standing here today, less than 2 generations after the Civil Rights Movement, as a proud Black American in the presence of many of our national leaders, speaking about my ideas. This breakfast is also a particular honor for my family as well. My mom and dad immigrated here from Ethiopia over 2 decades ago, bringing the values of hard work, perseverance, and compassion, and most importantly, a firm belief in the values of this country. Their fundamental traits continue to serve as the driving force in my own life. Martin Luther King, my parents, and most importantly, God, have taught me that we all have a rightful place in our country, in our communities, and on platforms like these. And that so long as we believe in unity, fear-mongering cannot divide us. Now, if the braces and lack of facial hair aren't a dead giveaway, I'll just put it on the table. I'm 16. But the lessons and experiences that I've learned and gained throughout the past few months often have me checking for balding patches. In all seriousness, though, throughout each endeavor, I've had a major takeaway. As a student advocate for March for Our Lives, I witnessed firsthand the power of our voices, we the young people, and our nation when we mobilize for a common cause. That same power is seen in almost every major social justice movement in this nation. Just this year, recognizing the lasting and bitter remnants of de facto segregation in my home county, my good friend Michael Solomon and I pushed, mobilized, and got our school board to pass a resolution forcing our district to restudy its boundary lines. Echoing the words of Dr. King, we fought to make sure that racial background and socioeconomic status never determine the quality of one's education in our county. Our county, workplaces, and schools increasingly consist of cultural, racial, and ethnic groups who can learn and grow from each other. And our schools should reflect that. When I joined the Poor People's Campaign, I got arrested fighting to keep families at our border together. And I learned the sense of fulfillment one finds when going to the greatest lengths to fight for what they believe in. The lessons Dr. King leaves behind remind me of the importance of maintaining morality in our nation's political decisions, and that America is bigger than the sum of our personal ambitions. Now today, and every other day that follows, we must honor Dr. King's legacy. On this day, we must come together to remind ourselves to choose love over hate, morality over immorality. On this day, we must band together to build bridges over walls. And on this day, we have to remind ourselves to be the beacons of hope for the millions of faces that we cannot see, for the stories that we cannot hear. A great man once said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. A great man once said that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. A great man once said that the time is always right to do what is right. That man died fighting for our nation, for a better world that he wanted his grandchildren to see. We can't let his efforts be in vain. We need to reflect on the impact that we choose to leave the world with, be it enacting positive change in our own communities or taking our fight to a national scale. We need to ensure that we are taking each step in a positive, purposeful direction. So let's continue the work of this organization. Let's continue the legacy of Dr. King and champion equity for all. Thank you.
Nate's invite. That is the future of our country, y'all. And it's a bright future. It's fantastic. Now, I would like to introduce Kenny Thompson, Jr. Mr. Thompson serves as Senior Director of Government and External Affairs for PepsiCo. He is responsible for the coordination and implementation of PepsiCo's outreach programs and global stakeholder engagement. Prior to joining PepsiCo, Kenny served in the Obama White House and held several positions, including Director of Message Events for Vice President Joe Biden, Senior Advisor to the United States Trade Representative Ron Kirk, and Special Assistant and Advanced Lead for President Obama. Kenny Thompson, Jr., ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, I got to follow Nate. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much, Hill. It's good to see you. And thank you so much, Rev, who's on the Amtrak. You know, this week for me took on a little bit of a new meaning. I called my grandfather in preparation just to get his thoughts. I do this pretty regularly. And he actually shared with me that he met Dr. King once. He told me that in 1961, while serving in the Air Force, he was stationed in Montgomery, Alabama. And one day, while walking out of a drugstore, and Dr. King was walking into the drugstore, they exchanged a few words, a brief conversation, and Dr. King said, "Thank you for your service." And my grandfather replied, "No, sir, thank you for yours." This was the first time my grandfather ever shared this story with me. I'm not sure what took him so long to pass this information along, but this week I've been really reflecting on it. How incredible is it that same young serviceman who met Dr. King outside of a segregated drugstore in 1961 would 50 years later be introduced to the first black president by his own grandson. So for me, this day is about three things. Reflection on how far we've come with an eye toward the future, and wherever Nate is, Nate, you are the future. Service, how can we better serve one another? And saying thank you to all those who have come before us and who have sacrificed so much. So on behalf of PepsiCo, I want to thank Reverend Sharpton, the National Action Network, for leading the fight for justice for all Americans. PepsiCo is proud to stand with you, and we are proud to partner with you. And finally, I'd like to say congratulations to today's honorees, Sherrilyn, Everett, and Nate, and to Vice President Biden, who's also on the Amtrak. I've learned so much from you over the years, and I thank you so much for the service you've given to this country. Thank you all, and happy King Day.
At this time, I'd like to bring Michelle E. Banks back up, our event co-chair, and we want to give a very special thanks to our sponsors. And in fact, can reps of these organizations, if you're a rep of this organization or you're there, please stand up as we acknowledge you. Our Dream Keeper level sponsors: 1199 SEIU, AFGE, AT&T, AFT, Comcast, NBC Universal, Eli Lilly, Essence, Macy's, MasterCard, PepsiCo, RAI, T-Mobile, Uber. Justice Partner level: Facebook, Google, Juul, NAB, MPAA, Friends of Nan, 32BJ, Airbnb, Eastern Star Church, Rice Financials, SCIU. Michelle, Tanya can't be here.
Yes.
But she is here in spirit, and we truly thank you for what you've done and bringing us together here. We couldn't be here without you. So give it up for Michelle E. Banks, y'all.
Thank you, Hill. Thank you, everyone. And if Tanya were here today, she had a very special presentation to you, Hill, that on this MLK Day, on behalf of AT&T and the humanity of connection, here is for you the Visionary Award, Hill Harper. Thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do, Hill. Thank you for your Manifest Your Destiny Foundation, serving underserved youth so that they can achieve academic excellence. Hill, every day you walk the talk, and we are grateful for you. We are grateful that you were here with us today, for your leadership and your service. May God bless you.
Bless you. Thank you. This is very unexpected. Thank you so much. You know, we want to close today by thanking Reverend Al Sharpton, and hopefully we will be doing this for years to come. In a time where there's so much is riding our political futures, this is a wonderful opportunity to get together and listen to some key voices and driving conversations that are vital. It's a difficult time. We reflect on 1968, which was a very difficult year, obviously, for this country. And in many ways, 2019 and moving forward towards 2020 represents some of the same exact challenges. And without National Action Network and great civil rights organizations represented here, our work would be just that much more difficult. And with NAN's youth director, Mary Pat Hector, and folks like Nate Tinbite, we are in good hands. But it is up to us to continue the work of organizations and support organizations like the National Action Network to keep these important conversations happening. Y'all have a beautiful and blessed MLK Day. God bless you. And watch The Good Doctor tonight on ABC, 10 o'clock. God bless.
And the federal government has been partially closed now for 31